This Renault victory was the most shameful in the entire history of Formula One. For the sake of the result, the team decided that it could compromise the lives of other drivers. I'm really frustrated that they ruined the dream of an innocent racer. Sadly, 15 years later, he is still pursuing it. So what the hell happened? Following the McLaren scandal, Alonso decided to join Renault. It seemed like a step backwards, as the French team lagged far behind the championship leaders. However, the first Formula One Singapore Grand Prix in the history of Formula One was about to take place. In the second free practice session, Fernando Alonso showed the best time. The result promised a fight for a high starting position in qualifying. Still, he took 6th place in the first segment and ran into fuel supply problems in the second. That forced Fernando to stop the car. When he came back to the pits, he told reporters that the team had missed its best chance of the season. As a result, Alonso took 15th place. Fernando's teammate also failed in qualifying. He took 16th place, so both cars started at the end positions. You see, overtaking is a real challenge in Singapore. Thus, they both felt they had to win the race with their brains. Their plan? A bold move. Refuel Alonso's tank for only 12 laps and hope for a quick breakthrough at the start. It sounded crazy, but it could have worked. Although on the 12th lap, Alonso had already damned the strategy. It was a big mistake. He just lost time. Was there still a chance to make this risk pay off? All of a sudden, 2 laps after the pit stop, Nelson Piquet Jr. hit the wall at the 17th turn. Notably, this section is extremely difficult to remove and repair a car. As a result, this incident caused the safety car to come out, which dramatically changed the course of the race. Suddenly, the leaders ended up at the back of the peloton, while the drivers behind them took the lead. By a lucky break, Fernando ended up benefiting the most. While his rivals were losing time, he used every opportunity to move up. His early pit stop seemed to be a drawback, but now it became an advantage. As a result, he broke through from 15th place to 5th. Then, thanks to an extended second pit stop, he took the lead and won the race easily. Alonso made a crazy comeback from last to first place. However, doesn't it seem strange to you? Anyone who is versed in Formula One immediately suspected something. The words of legendary Martin Brown on the air only made it more obvious.
It's an irony, isn't it, that without that fuel line falling off in qualifying and being backing 15th on the grid, forcing them to do an unusual strategy that worked perfectly when the safety car came out because the other Renault hit the wall, it's played into his hands.
Before stepping onto the podium, Alonso himself noted the role of the safety car.
Jumping up and down and doing...
However, there were no official statements in the media. As a result, the Formula One season proceeded without any controversy, making for a quiet ending. However, behind the scenes of Formula One, the situation was rather stressful. Nelson Piquet Jr.'s father was the first to disclose some information about the possible staging of the accident. He addressed this to President Max Mosley. How do you feel about this, Max?
I was told by Nelson Piquet Sr. And then I just said, well, if there's anything in that, Nelson Jr. should simply make a statement. So he made a statement, and then we've looked at all the surrounding circumstances and also questioned some people. And we've sent the entire dossier to the Renault team, and we're now waiting for them to answer, because the one thing you know for sure is there are 2 sides to every story, and as far as we're concerned, they have to be considered innocent unless until they're proved guilty.
The information about the Formula One case became known to the press only on August 30th, 2009. Do you have any idea why? I assure you, it was not a coincidence. The whole thing started when Nelson Piquet Jr. was fired from the Renault team. He wanted revenge and decided to make sure that every team member felt the consequences. Therefore, Nelson informed the FIA about the deliberate crash of the car at the Singapore Grand Prix. He claimed that Siemens and Briatore asked him to deliberately crash his car to favor Fernando Alonso's tactics. According to his words, this plan was discussed with Pat Simons and Flavio Briatore. They insisted on 14 laps and told him the exact location of the accident. It is also known that the Brazilian repeatedly asked the team to confirm the lap he was on in order to do everything right. Fernando had to use the time to distance himself and score maximum points, and it worked out perfectly. According to Nelson Piquet Jr., he experienced a lot of stress due to his uncertain future in Formula One. The team manipulated the contract to pressure him. Finally, after the race, Briatore only briefly thanked Piquet. No one ever mentioned the incident again. I hope this statement will finally force the most competent organization in the world to act. That's why they said they were investigating the Grand Prix in the previous Formula One calendar.
Can you conceive of a team though asking a driver to crash solely to gain a win?
Well, it depends what else is at stake, and one never knows of these things, but sometimes it can be almost life and death to them, or survival.
You said the
I mean, it obviously not necessarily telling a driver to crash, but to have a win could be enormously important.
On September 4th, 2009, the FIA reached a conclusion and formally accused Renault of conspiring with Nelson Piquet Jr. to cheat at the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. While the evidence was overwhelming, Renault quickly confessed to the fraud and apologized to all Formula One participants. Moreover, they immediately fired Siemens and Briatore from the team. By doing so, they made it clear that those people were responsible for the situation. How do you think they were punished? Flavio got a lifetime disqualification from attending the paddock. He was also banned from being a manager and team leader. He wasn't even allowed to buy tickets for the race. LOL. Although later in court, the Italian managed to reduce his suspension to 5 years, but never returned to Formula One. Siemens was also banned for 5 years, but he made a comeback. The Renault team got a suspended disqualification for 2 years. Unless the team commits something similar during the period, the problem should be resolved. Against the background of Briatore's life ban, this sounds like a promenade in the park. Actually, the French team suffered hard consequences of this scandal. It was a period of financial crisis, so every sponsor mattered a lot. Their main sponsor, ING, reacted quickly and terminated their $300 million sponsorship agreement. And that's not the only impact. Another sponsor, Mutua Madrilena, also stepped out. A funny fact, in 2009, at the Singapore Grand Prix, Romain Grosjean, who replaced Nelson Piquet Jr., repeated the crash at the same turn. This made the new team leader laugh. And what happened to Renault's drivers? Due to his confession, Nelson Piquet Jr. was found not guilty and escaped punishment. Still, it was the Brazilian who suffered the most image damage of all. You see, he knew his way around. His father was a 3-time Formula One world champion. Piquet Jr. had the potential to become a champion. This incident abruptly put his career on hold. Once the case was solved, Nelson said that F1 teams showed interest in him, but the reality was different. None of the teams wanted to deal with him. At the age of 24, he went overseas to NASCAR racing. He made a comeback to European racing only in 2014, winning his debut season in Formula E. And this is just the beginning of the whole drama. Let me explain. The most surprising decision was to allow Alonso to keep his points and avoid punishment. Fans raged against him for his involvement in such a shameful situation. However, his guilt was never officially proven. Nelson Piquet admitted that he did not know whether Alonso was involved in that plan. However, he suggested that the Spanish driver should have had some doubts about the 12-lap strategy. Felipe Massa added his voice to the accusations. He claimed that Alonso was definitely involved in the conspiracy. However, Massa later retracted his words and said that it was all about emotions. Oh man, he really had a lot to be angry about. You may be surprised, but he was the greatest victim of that situation. During the first pit stop,
oh no! That's a big mistake, Massa's gone!
Felipe's mechanic signaled the green light too early.
He's got a green light. He's got a green light.
So, he drove out of the pits with the fuel hose. The Italian's method once again worked perfectly. This is not the first time they have robbed a driver of his victory. In the previous video, we covered no less dramatic case. So, Felipe stopped at the end of the pit lane. It took him ages to wait until the mechanic served his teammate Kimi Räikkönen. Then they ran to him across the pit lane,
Shouting at the Ferrari guys, go on, get down there!
and struggled to remove the fuel hose from his car. As a result, Felipe lost a lot of time and fell back to the end of the peloton. After that, the judges also penalized him for driving through the pit lane. Brilliant. Since Massa was battling for the world title, it was a disaster. Massa triumphantly won the last race in Brazil, his homeland.
A very dignified, very dignified performance.
Unfortunately, it was not enough. He was only 1 point short of the title. The crucial event was that very race in Singapore. Imagine his pain when your live stream was ruined by someone's ignorance. It would have broken my heart. Lewis Hamilton won the season, and the whole situation was forgotten, until many years later, when Bernie Ecclestone said shocking words. He said that he and Mosley knew about the intentional accident before the end of the 2008 season. However, they both kept the situation under wraps to avoid a scandal. Bernie also said that the race in Singapore should have been cancelled in accordance with the rules. I'm very sorry for Massa. They crushed his dream and the dreams of thousands of his fans. I think the chances of changing anything are very low. However, it is important to remember this injustice, since this race really changed Formula One. It wasn't the first time a Brazilian driver was injured. The 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix went down in history as the most insane race in the history of Formula One. Click on the video to find out what happened back then.